Hello and welcome to the Imprint Weekly Podcast. I'm John Kelly, Senior Editor of The Imprint, a daily news site covering child welfare and youth justice around the country. You can read all of our coverage at imprintnews.org or check us out on Facebook or Twitter at The Imprint News. You can also sign up on our homepage for our free weekly and monthly newsletters. And for professionals in child welfare and youth justice, subscribe to our Youth Services Insider section for a closer look at news on business policy and practice. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is also a member of the Safe Camp Audio Network. You can check out our show page and all of Safe Camp's other great podcasts at safecampaudio.org on the web or at Safe Camp Audio on social media. On this week's episode, we are joined by Jessica Nowlan, President and CEO of Reimagine Freedom, and Lisa Small, who is the Director of Youth and Transformative Justice at the Liberty Hill Foundation, to discuss efforts in Los Angeles to end the use of incarceration for girls and young women involved with the county's juvenile justice system, especially the vast majority that pretty much everyone agrees are locked up unnecessarily. So in October of 2023, the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to work towards ending the incarceration of girls and gender-expansive young people. And that same month, the Liberation Fund was born by the Liberty Hill Foundation. It is a philanthropic commitment to envisioning and creating the path in Los Angeles to supporting system-involved girls and gender-expansive youth without the need for incarceration. And in her position, Lisa Small oversees the Liberation Fund. Jessica Nowlan is an important piece of that puzzle that they are putting together. So we discussed what has changed in the past few years since the Liberation Fund was launched, what is yet to change in Los Angeles, and we talked about a couple other things. Without further ado, here is our conversation with Jessica Nowlan and Lisa Small. In October of 2023, the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to work towards ending the incarceration of girls and gender-expansive young people. And that same month, the Liberation Fund was born. It's a philanthropic commitment to envisioning and creating a path in Los Angeles to supporting system-involved girls and gender-expansive youth without the need for incarceration. And here to discuss what has happened so far on both of those fronts and what, in their view, still needs to happen are Lisa Small of the Liberty Hill Foundation and Jessica Nowlan, President and CEO of Reimagine Freedom. Guys, thanks for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast. How you doing?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Lisa, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. So thrilled to be in conversation with you all.
So since we are always getting into serious stuff on this podcast, I always make our guests give me a little bit of a lighter side of them. So I'm going to ask each one of you guys to give me a favorite in one of these pop culture categories. You can give me more than that if you want, but at least one. TV show or movie, sports team, musical group, or book. Lisa, I'm going to make you go first. What do you got?
It's only slightly lighter than what we're talking about today, but right now I have on my bedside table Erased by Anna Malika Tubbs, which is a good friend and partner of both Jess and I. She has written another incredible book that I recommend you all getting immediately and reading, where she unpacks American patriarchy, which of course has everything to do with what we're talking about today, but she does it in a brilliant and just easy to read and beautiful way.
Okay, that sounds pretty worky and serious, but we're going to embrace reading as recreation, even when it's serious. So we will applaud and accept that answer.
But I'll also say, go Dodgers. We're so happy
Go
our Dodgers are back in action.
The best team that money can buy. I'm not a hater. No, for real, they are amazing. And I love watching Ohtani, even if I'm not a fan. Jess, what do you got for the people in one or more of these categories? TV show or movie, sports team, musical group, or book?
Yeah, definitely not sports, but my favorite show ever, I actually can't even go to sleep unless I play it on repeat, is The Office. It's every single night. Yeah, and I love Stevie Nicks, so those both get me out of work, decompress.
That is an excellent one, too. And I love the idea of you waging the battle to keep young people free all day and then coming home to watch just Michael Scott scenes and stuff like that. It's really good. I really love that. Okay, so like I kind of said in the setup, October of 2023 kind of becomes this sort of momentous month in the history of youth justice in Los Angeles because the board commits to basically just not incarcerating young women at some point. I don't think they specified when, but committing to working towards that. And at the same time, Lisa, Liberty Hill announces the Liberation Fund. So I was hoping you could give us a little bit of an origin story on the fund. Is it a coincidence those two happen at the same time or right around each other? What was the sort of backstory on how Liberty Hill moved this into its sort of priority focus for youth justice?
Yeah. So what I can say is in some ways it was a coincidence. In some ways, nothing is a coincidence. I'll say the timing had more to do with the fact that when I started Liberty Hill in 2018, we were working very diligently and very hard on ending incarceration for young people across LA County. That was the stated mission of what we were doing in our youth justice department, was figuring out how do we end the incarceration of all young people and how do we build the largest, most comprehensive youth development system in its place. And what we began to see after several decades of working on this project is that it was working. Movement organizing, young people who were mobilizing, folks who are building the alternatives through incredible community programs. We're creating an environment in which over a 20-year time period, we shrunk youth incarceration in LA County by 85%. And that was incredible and incredible to see. And at the same time, what we were noticing is that the proportion of women who were incarcerated in the system was growing, and that the progress for girls and gender expansive youth was stalling. And so we knew that girls could be served well in their community of origin. We knew that 99% of girls did not pose a risk to public safety and could be in their communities. And so we just saw this incredible opportunity to really replicate a lot of the work that we had been doing around boys and men of color, but noticing that voices of survivors, voices of young women and women-led organizations were absent from the solutions, not absent from the solutions, but absent from the light being shined on their solutions. And that just by nature of centering a gender-based approach led by girls and women, it becomes innovation. It becomes the way that we can finish the job, essentially, for ending youth incarceration, in my opinion, for all young people in LA County.
I want to ask Jess about her perspective on that time as well in a second, but I wanted to make sure I kind of understood two sort of points you put out there. When you say that there was an 80% decline in the juvenile or youth population and the portion of girls was going up, do you mean actually numerically going up, or they became a larger percentage of that much smaller population? Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure if I asked.
Yes. No, it's a good nuance that you're striking, because to your point, overall, the numbers have been going down steadily.
Even for girls.
Even for girls.
Okay.
In the early 2000s, we were incarcerating thousands upon thousands of young people in 16 youth prisons. Now, on any given day in LA County, we're incarcerating around 400 to 500 young people. So progress has been steady for everyone. And yet, after COVID, when we were watching the incredible decarceration of young people, we also saw that there were increases or stagnations in the girls' population.
Okay. And then the other one was, I heard you right. You said that 99% of the girls who are incarcerated in Los Angeles essentially don't need to be there. And that obviously is something that conversationally, two people could disagree about what that means. My understanding is that actually, like, the county has said that, right? Like,
yeah,
so justice officials have said almost every one of these girls doesn't need to be here.
Yeah, and that's actually based on probation's own risk assessment tools.
Right.
So the tool that LA County probation uses to determine risk of a young person has said that according to that tool, 99% of girls don't meet the threshold for needing to be inside our camps and halls. But often young people are still inside these, we call them youth jails, because that's what they are, because they've been trafficked or because they are vulnerable or identified as vulnerable in a different way. And so by nature of that, there are overrides that are done to keep young people in these facilities because there's this perception that there's nowhere else for them to go. And Jess, really, I would love to invite you into this conversation, because what we know is that There are many places where young people can be served well and safe in the community, particularly girls, particularly with some of the organizations that Jess is so closely involved with.
So, Jess, yes, let's go to you now. Because if I'm hearing Lisa right there, it's not a situation of these judges don't know or the system doesn't know what else to do with them. There actually are options and they are aware of them and are not doing them. Is that right? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think generally that's right. And there is some great champions that do, but I think as a system that the idea of what crime and punishment looks like is very ingrained in the culture. And so with the dismantling of the group homes, I think happened in 2012, like even though like we have a project called Beloved Village, we created it as an alternative to incarceration and congregate care. It's much cheaper, it has better life outcomes for the young people, better life outcomes for the families. And we're running it as a pilot to really affect policy and culture change. But the decisions folks make are really ingrained in what's always been done. And so I think that that's the biggest issue we see. And my staff are fighting like one by one, right? Let me show you what else is possible. Let's make a plan. Let's show the judge. And our primary organization is Young Women's Freedom Center. We've been around for 34 years. It was built by formerly incarcerated young people, including myself. And we built what we needed when our families, communities, and systems failed us, when all the safety nets failed us. We said, we know what we want, we know what we need. And for the past 34 years, we've reduced recidivism between 87 and 90% each year with the young people that we work with.
That's right. So you were like one of the first people to work for Young Women's Freedom Center, right? Back in the
Looking in
90s?
the third year, yeah.
The third year.
The third year. Latifah Simon, Congresswoman Latifah Simon was my first boss. She became executive director at 19. I became deputy director at 18, and we were literally in charge of this organization. And again, we built what we needed and we built an institution that's worked with over 50,000 young women and girls. And what we know is that we end up in the system because the safety nets fail us. From housing to food to we believe every young person deserves a loving home. When we heard that the Board of Supervisors was thinking of passing this motion, I think like all of us called every single day and we were like, let's make this happen. Because in 2020, we launched a 10-year campaign in California to end the criminalization and incarceration of girls. And our thought and belief is that if we can end it in Los Angeles, the biggest justice system in the country, we can do it anywhere.
Part of the impetus for Liberation Fund is that I met Jessica and we had been hearing and tracking the immense progress that was going on in the Bay Area, being led by Young Women's Freedom Center in partnership with Vera Institute and other partners. But it was really the Young Women's Freedom Center that was paving the way for ending girls' incarceration in Santa Clara County. And we really wanted to learn from that progress. And so in thinking through how do we do that in Los Angeles, part of the impetus for the Liberation Fund was thinking about how can we build collaboration around girls serving advocates, organizers, school providers, mental health providers, lawyers, everyone who's touching a young girl's life. How do we build collaboration and fund that collaboration so that we could do that at the scale of Los Angeles, really centering the models that Young Women's Freedom Center has been leading for 30 years.
Yeah. Just fun fact. My first interview as a professional journalist was Latifah Simon. When she was that would have been in 2000 or 2001 when I was working at Youth Today back in the day, back when that used to exist as like a industry rag for youth work. And she got on Oprah. And they were like, we got to talk to her about youth work stuff. Oprah is going to talk to you up here. Let's get into the details of there. So that was my first deal. Yeah. So Lisa, give us some examples. Obviously, you've invested in Jess and what she's doing, but what other investments has the Liberation Fund made?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first, I will say that we've invested in an incredible team of facilitators. We work with Jessica as one of the facilitators and Danny Kim and Tia Martinez for organizing Roots. And they have really helped build an infrastructure that made the blueprint possible of these 12 organizations coming together to really chart the path for ending girls' incarceration and resourcing the power building movement. But the group is really multifaceted. There's the New Village Girls Academy that's done incredible work around alternative education, centering girls and gender expansive youth and helping pregnant teens. We work with Beloved and obviously Young Women's Freedom Center as anchors around housing and youth support. Students Deserve and Youth Justice Coalition are two that are doing incredible work around youth organizing. But then we also have Nickel, who's doing some incredible work around legal advocacy for commercially sexually exploited young girls and the overlap of that population in the system. And so when we looked at the community and we saw even the Spirit Awakening foundations of the world who are doing arts and theater and incredible work around just the creative industry, you can really see how youth development shows up in the way we all want youth development for our kids. Youth development is sports, it's arts, it's theater, it's youth development in the street doing organizing. So it can really look many different ways. And we really thought if we're going to be putting together a group of leaders who are thinking about the future for young people, all those facets need to be included.
You mentioned there and just did beforehand, Beloved Village, which is a project of your organization. Actually, before I ask about that, let's start with Reimagine Freedom, Jess. Tell people a little bit about that organization, and then we can get to Beloved Village specifically.
Sure. So in 2017, Young Women's Freedom Center gathered 200 directly impacted women and girls. And we really were like digging into the question is how are women and girls criminalized? And how do we end mass incarceration if we're not telling the full story of criminalization? We then created a freedom charter based after the South African Freedom Charter. It took us 5 years, 500 people. And so it's this clear vision of what we mean when we're talking about freedom. And this became so powerful, and it became our North Star that Reimagine Freedom was created to help us build infrastructure to get there, right? We have powerful nonprofits. We have Young Women's Freedom Center, who's been doing amazing work for 34 years. We founded the Sister Warriors Freedom Coalition, which is doing powerful work across the state. Beloved Village, and Reimagine Freedom is investing in leaders, other organizations, and projects that will help us reach that goal.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about Beloved Village, because you wrote an excellent op-ed for us. I want to say it was probably a year ago today, maybe a little bit longer than that, which I will drop a link to the piece in our show notes for our listeners here, because I would definitely read it. It's a really interesting take on the moment of this enormous precedent-setting $4 billion lawsuit that sort of addressed the past claims of abuse by many young people who have experienced the systems and other very bad outcomes with adults in Los Angeles' history, and why it was a bittersweet moment, frankly, for you and others. But it really fell in your writing about and explaining what Beloved Village was then. It's where the rubber meets the road on this whole gambit that we're talking about with Liberation Fund. It's articulating there are things we believe will work to not have to incarcerate these youth. You are admitting you also agree don't need to be incarcerated. So let's try it out. And there was an interesting sticking point in the way at the time. So tell people what the idea is for this program. And then I want to hear whether things have changed really since you wrote that op-ed.
Totally. So yeah, the idea for Beloved Village came out of our work in Santa Clara, where we did end incarceration of girls for 2 years. And we also know that the biggest structural drivers of incarceration is poverty and housing and houselessness. And the idea for Beloved is that every girl and gender expansive youth deserves a safe and loving home where she can thrive and dream and reach her goals. So we are investing $65,000 per year plus wraparound service into the young people. And I want to say a really broad family. It could be bio family, extended family, and we're seeing really good results, right? Part of the other piece when we started Beloved was like, some counties are spending over $1 million to incarcerate a young person. And we do not see good outcomes. We see high recidivism. We see young people who are literally sexually abused while they're incarcerated. And our idea was, well, if we were putting that money into resourcing, that is actually the change lever. And if we stop criminalizing families and communities and we actually look at the good things. I was a little naive when we started because the numbers seemed like, yeah, 1 million versus 65,000. And people were like, oh my God, it's so expensive. But we've been able to raise money and we are having really significant results. We have found that one family finding is not happening. And that is the requirement of probation before you send a young person to congregate care, which is group homes. We know congregate care doesn't work. It's particularly bad for girls. I think I ran from every 10 group homes I was ever at. And yeah, we're also seeing some barriers. One is the culture change I talk about in the system when we're turning over every single leaf. Sometimes we flew in family members from other states that are like, of course I want this young person. I love them. So yeah, and then we ran into an issue with licensing because some youth don't have somewhere to go, but we're figuring that out as well.
One of the things you mentioned in the piece was the difficulty in obtaining affordable insurance, which is this whole thing that's going on in California right now, quite related to the settlement that you also mentioned, right? Because they certainly one doesn't forgive the other or anything like that, but the insurance premiums are going up for a lot of things. They're going up a lot for youth service providers that are doing residential stuff. So were you able to, what's the deal with that? Have you been able to get through that?
In fact, no. We got our foster care license. We've been
Uh-huh.
unable to get insurance. We have 6 months to get accredited, but you have to have insurance to take youth. It's like a catch-22. We do currently have a budget proposal to the state so we could build out a pilot and create a public system where there's no profiting off it. But the biggest thing for me that's so crazy with the insurance on foster care specifically, which is uninsurable in California right now for the most part, is that this is not where the majority of the abuse is happening. In fact, the majority of the abuse is happening in county-run facilities, in juvenile halls, in huge children's homes, and they're still running great. They're not running great, but they're still up and running. The probation's budget's over 1 billion, but over 90% of the abuse happened at probation. So when we've been researching the foster care agencies, there's just about 2 cases as opposed to I think it's a 5 billion now settlement. I think it's also the biggest settlement in the history of the United States.
I believe that's right.
And the other thing I just want to say is that solving the issue on the backs of survivors is insane. It is not just LA County. I think I mentioned my own experience in San Francisco. Our organization, Sister Words, is the 3rd year legislated by the state of California to address sexual assault in California's women's prisons. It is in every part of the system because these are women and girls who are under lock and key and deemed as undeserving and bad. And so to put it on the backs of the survivors, we also know that at least 85% of girls that enter in the system are already abuse survivors. Is pretty insane.
I remember reading your piece, and so the first time, because I'm the guy that also edits our op-eds and works with writers, I just 2 paragraphs in, I was reading it like, oh, is this going to be like a sour grapes op-ed about people in the past getting restitution? And I quickly realized it's a much more powerful point you're making, which is that it's not bitter about it happening. It's bitter about the mentality that it purports to solve anything present day. That's how I took it. It's like all well and good for the people who have experienced this, but we still have a system that is creating these conditions.
100%. And that there's not one strategy to address that right now. The strategy to address that is get the girls out of there, get the young people out of there. But that's not even really on the table in this lawsuits, and we're trying to fight. It's not called SB 577 anymore but they are going to gut and amend another bill in LA County They've all been lobbying for it. It's going to be a state bill that will really reduce the ability of future survivors or past survivors to be able to file suit. And filing suit, but why would we only limit this population of survivors, right? What we need to be doing is addressing current and future abuse. Otherwise, we're just going to limit, and then it's okay. It could keep happening.
And part of the context around that is we talked about over the past 20 years, reducing the youth population by 85%. But in that same 20-year period, the budget for LA County probation has not changed at all. It still constitutes 3% of our entire county's budget. And so when LA County is faced with lawsuits of this amount, it puts a lot of pressure on our county financially. And that is accurate. But unfortunately, the calls for justice of survivors and the calls saying this harm is happening came over 4 decades. And because that harm wasn't addressed, it became such a large problem that now everyone's saying we're going to go bankrupt as a county if we have to continue to pay these settlements. It's going to come from other departments that serve youth that we care about, which is a valid concern. And yet like our solutions for young people, there are so many different ways to solve the problems that we face in our system. The one way you could solve the financial problem in LA is to say, okay, we're going to stop the ability for survivors to seek justice from being abused in public systems. There's many other ways we can solve this financial problem, one of which could be getting young people who don't need to be there out, and the other can be thinking about how the systems that perpetuate the harm can be held accountable first, rather than re-injuring survivors. That, to Jessica's point, this may be their third moment of being victimized by this system.
If you work in California's child welfare, foster care, or mental health services field, mark your calendar for August 31st through September 3rd. Stronger Together 2026, hosted by the California Alliance of Child and Family Services, brings 800-plus professionals to the Anaheim Marriott for 4 days of training, tools, and community. 80 sessions across 5 tracks, CE credits across 8 licensure types, and a room full of peers navigating the same funding pressures, policy shifts, and insurance challenges you are. This is where California's Child and Family Services community comes to connect and recharge. Join us in Anaheim. Learn more at cacfs.org.
It feels like, from how you guys describe it, there's like little chance of moving the needle on this very small group who remain incarcerated unless there's some give towards investing in community options versus probation spending. Am I off on that, or does that feel necessary for the things that the Liberation Fund are advocating for and all of these other advocacy efforts to reform in Los Angeles are pursuing?
What I think is so powerful about the Liberation Fund, it's like supporting the brilliance of the groups to come out, is that we're like 2-tiered strategies. One is, if probation, the courts do nothing, how do we get these girls out one by one? Right? And that is happening. And the girl, like, if you ever come to Young Women's Freedom Center, it's every day there's a celebration of someone graduating high school and getting off probation. And then the other side is, how do we actually put teeth into the policies and do organizing? And I think working on both strategies, the needle is slow, as I won't cuss, but so slow. But I think from my perspective, I've been doing this work since 1996. And that slow movement is how we reduced populations by 85%. I think you could hear different conversations about girls. And I'll say there are some really strong advocates, I think, at the state level, who are helping to move the needle, plus on the ground. I'm also an optimist, and it's infuriating that we are where we're at. But I think we can get somewhere.
Yeah, I think the same. I think actually the story of youth justice and the story of what we're talking about is a story of immense progress. The fact that so much of the work that Jess and others have been doing has led to this decline in youth incarceration shows me that actually we're at the fourth quarter, going back to our sports metaphors from earlier in our conversation, different sport, but we're really at the fourth quarter. And I think that is when it is the hardest, because we are asking for a system to really think about change from a systemic level. And we're asking for our leaders to recommit to a plan that's been working. So I do want to reemphasize that LA County ushered in a care first agenda that included Measure J, which was one of the largest investments in youth development in our county's history. 10% of our budget's going to health and wellness and community informed programs. We are seeing so much progress when it comes to Ready to Rise and other networks of youth development providers working together to serve youth in the community. And I think sometimes we look at the last fights, which are the hardest, and say, oh God, this is impossible. But the impossible has already happened. And now it's really about finishing the job, in my opinion. I think it's really about helping our leaders work together and continuing to build the commitment around the approaches that have been working well.
It seems so deceptively simple that it almost makes me wary of it being tricky. Jess is nodding her head, so maybe she feels the same way. But you've got a group of most of girls who pretty much everybody agrees do not need to be incarcerated. It's the simple solution is, okay, if we all agree they shouldn't be there, then where should they be? And then the next logical step would be to just allocate resources to that. So it feels like the missing thing here is maybe I'm guessing, a paternalistic sense that like for every Jess who believes here's a couple of things we could do instead of incarceration. There's just some people that are really rooted in there's nothing I would do. There's no place I'd put these girls that I would trust they wouldn't be hurt again or reoffend again or whatever. I don't know. I apologize if this sounds like rambling. I'm trying to understand and crystallize where we're at in the moment, because it does seem simple on some level. The 99% buy-in thing seems like it should catapult you through this thing as eventually, if everybody just agrees that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is it's always been simple, right? Like the young people we're talking about are the same young people we were talking about in the 90s, different era, different town, right? But if you really listen to them, I need a job, I need housing. What do you want to do? And you wrote, I don't want to go to school, I want to be a nurse. They have dreams. And we know from all sectors of society, like when you invest in people and you create pathways to opportunity, that's what's transformation. When people have economic choice. I think that what makes it complicated is big, strong systems with huge budgets and leaders who are thinking about their next electoral race. The other thing that makes it complicated is that judges and probation officers and all these people who are making decisions about people's lives have very short interactions with these young people, often in their worst moments. It is your worst moment to be incarcerated and to be strip searched and to be so scared, or to go to court and you have no idea what anybody's talking about. And those things are 5 and 10 minutes. And what we know at Young Women's Freedom Center, when young people feel safe and they can be young people and make mistakes and try things, like we've worked with 50,000 girls over the past 34 years. The system isn't humanizing them. They don't have real relationship with them. And I think that's really important.
I also think, when you look at the investment in girls, less than 2% of all philanthropic funding goes to support women and girls across the largest county in our nation. This is pretty stark, the underinvestment in their futures. And yet, listen to the incredible numbers and progress that Jess is talking about. I think that is really the task in front of the Liberation Fund, is we are trying to resource the alternatives at the same level that we have resourced systems of harm. We've never tried that. And so as we continue to invest in this collaboration of women-led and survivor-led organizations, we're watching them build with one another. We're watching them invest in young people at this high rate. and it's working. And so I think for us, this is really a call to other funders, to other county agencies, to think through what are the ways in which we can work upstream for young people, and not, to Jess's point, not rely on the system to say, okay, we get it, we're going to just open the doors now. It really is about showcasing what works and resourcing alternatives to the point where, the system is starving. And ultimately, it really is going to take culture shift and political will. But I really do believe that funding the pathways that are working is what this work is about, and is the way that we can continue to show that this is not the only solution for young people. It's not how we support them. It's not how we empower them. And it's not how we redirect them when they've even lost their way. And to Jess's point, so many of the young people have not even committed crimes. They're only just surviving their own circumstances.
Yeah. Let's say, not that I or this podcast actually have this level of influence, but probation leaders hear this interview and they call you guys up and say, you know what, you're right. Let's come up with a plan to get all of these. How many girls are we talking about? It's 40 incarcerated.
40 and 50.
So let's get a 3-month plan together for how we're going to get these girls out of here. What do you guys do? If they put that power in your hands, take me through how you take 50 young women who are incarcerated and come up with what happens to them next.
Oh, totally. It's not that many at all. We have an amazing team. Each young woman will meet with them and figure out, what are the barriers? What do you need? What does it look like to thrive for you, literally? And make those plans and work with probation and the judges to make these individualized plans come true. And the individualized planning is the thing that works, right? It's not like, stamp, come home at 6 or you're going to jail, miss one day of school. You know what I mean? It's about, everybody has an individual life with individual needs. And our staff are like deeply trained, over 300 hours to go do that work. And for the most part, our staff is directly impacted. The young people can see themselves in the team and be like, whoa, that's possible for me too. So that's what we do. And of course, having the philanthropy dollars makes it better, because we're able to get school clothes, help. There's so many needs, pay for rent, like all of these things. But the county keeps saying we can't let them go because we need beds. And saying we need beds is the worst way to think about it, because it's not like we just need a room of beds to throw bodies in, right? We need individualized plans that are based on that young person's goals, their family specific circumstances, and that's informed by their network of support.
I want to understand that comment a little more. So your perception is that the county would be willing to release at least some of these girls to a different place and lack what they view as capacity elsewhere.
Yeah.
Whether that's foster care or something. Is that?
I think that's true. And part of it is that cultural shift about what beds are, right? Group homes as they were, like when I was a kid, don't exist anymore, right? And so that is the way things have always been done. And think of any government office. I always feel like DMV is the easiest one for everyone to think about, right?
We all have to go eventually.
We all have to go. Yeah. It's hell. It's, oh my God, they finally have a website, right? In like 2026. It's just like the system is so slow to change. And a part of that is culture. A part of it is bureaucracy, right? But it's many of these young people, it's not about a bed. It's about, oh, maybe you can't go home because you're living with your mom in her car. What if we get a 2-bedroom apartment? Let's resource mom and this young person. That is still cheaper, more effective, more supportive, and actually creates the structure that young person needs to not go back to jail. So I think if we think of it that way, like what is, again, every young person deserves a loving home where they can thrive. I think that's the culture shift we need to focus on.
The other exciting thing is that we have a dedicated Department of Youth Development now. I mean, for the first time in LA's history, we have stood up a department that's focused just on supporting young people. And that department's operating with $100 million budget. The probation department has $1 billion budget. And so if you have 100 hammers, everything looks like a nail. If you have one safe and supportive environment, it feels like there's not enough. But there's at any moment, LA County is going through our budget planning process right now. That Department of Youth Development is the byproduct of the leadership of this Board of Supervisors. They are the incredible leaders who have ushered in a care first, jails last approach. Were the ones who put Measure J on the ballot in many ways and really stood behind that investment in community safety through a non-carceral approach. And so there is incredible leadership and a mechanism to be resourcing, even in a county level, that had to usher in this change. And so I think it's also about looking at the resources we already have as a county to be able to continue to just think through solutions to these entrenched problems differently.
Jess, I want to ask you one practice question, and I don't want to end on a bummer note, so I do have an aspirational ending for you guys.
Right.
But I think of this because I actually just had another conversation for this podcast with a guy named David Muhammad. Maybe you know him, about something he's working on called high risk, hard to reach youth, mostly focused on boys. And one of the things that is a characteristic that they've identified in that group is situations where the family members of the young person are indifferent in some cases, maybe even hostile to what they're trying to do to develop that young person. What do you and your program do in those situations? I imagine the family unit, the parents involved, can either be an enormous asset if you're trying to rethink how to do something other than incarcerate somebody, but in the other case can be a barrier. So how do you get around that when you need to?
Totally. We have parent or caregiver advocates separate from the young people advocates because we know that you don't always have the same ideas, right?
Right, sure.
And so our parent navigators work really closely with the families, and they're also assessing with the young person and the parents, is it a good fit right now? And they're so creative in figuring it out, right? Maybe it's, I don't want her home until she's fixed, or she's, this is really hard. So then they're working to figure out who else is your support system, auntie, sister, friend, grandmother, and how do we support them and support healthy relationships between the families. So again, it's it is complicated and it's innovative. I was a single mom. I grew up in public housing I raised my kids in public housing. The stress of poverty is constant and nonstop. And so you're not always making the best decisions because you're hella stressed. And so we're addressing those, right?
Yeah.
We just work hard to figure it out, is what I'll say. And we have support groups. Last thing I'll say is through Beloved Village, we have this whole learning cohort for parents. So they're getting support, they're getting trained. We have a parent that we're supporting them to go through paramedic school right now. So it's super comprehensive, looking at the whole family unit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll get you guys out of here on this. For both of you, we're heading into, this is the third full year of the Liberation Fund. What are the conditions that would prompt you to see the experience as a victory? What needs to happen in Los Angeles County? Because I imagine the sort of baseline thing would be to not have these girls incarcerated at some point. But I'm betting it's more than that. I'm betting there's a goal beyond that. So Lisa, why don't you start? What is a victory for the Liberation Fund to you?
I will definitely reaffirm that getting to zero would be a completely catalytic achievement for LA County. And I think to your point, the solutions are simple. And a lot of folks are like, why are you focusing on 50 girls? That doesn't sound like a very big number. But when you unlock the change that getting to zero would create, it actually applies to 500 girls. Because on any given day, that one slot can be embodied, that can be taken by any of 500 girls. So I do want to continue to emphasize what you said. It's possible. And I really do believe that the other steps on the road of our success is what's going to achieve getting to zero, which is we have to center survivor voices. I think for so long, we have prioritized the voices of government officials, of funders, of everyone who thinks that they know how this should be done. And they're not talking to the exact people who have been working with folks on the street, who've been formerly incarcerated themselves, who have had loved ones inside. These are the folks who have been closest to this experience and know how we need to continue to support youth and families. So for me, success is a couple of things. It's making sure that survivors are leading the strategy. It's ensuring that we're resourcing women of color and girls-led organizations to be in a place where they can lead the entire movement from this innovative place. And I just want to be clear that for Liberty Hill, for the Liberation Fund, this has never just been about girls. This is truly about what does it look like to end the incarceration for all young people, to support boys and men of color as well. It's just that we have never done things flipped. We've always assumed that the reform that works for the full movement will work for girls. We've never looked at what works for girls and applied it back to the system. And I think that is really the moment we have in our hands right now, that the innovation we are creating within Liberation Fund and within these organizations are efforts that we haven't tried that can be important for all young people across our county.
Lisa Small of the Liberty Hill Foundation and Jessica Nowlan of Reimagine Freedom, thank you for joining me on the Imprint Weekly Podcast.
Thank you so much for your time, John. It's been so nice to talk to you.
Thanks to Jessica Nowlan of Reimagine Freedom and Lisa Small of the Liberty Hill Foundation for joining us today. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is a production of the Safe Camp Audio Network, which is a division of Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecampaudio.org on the web or at Safecamp Audio on all major social media. This podcast is produced and mixed by Christine Onjoko with music by Luke Giroux and Cyrus Elia. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would consider subscribing or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. We would greatly appreciate if you consider supporting our work here on the podcast and in print. Small donations from our listeners and readers go a long way towards helping us grow and cover more great stories in child welfare and youth justice. To support us, it is very easy. Just visit imprintnews.org/donate. You can follow The Imprint on Twitter and on Facebook by searching the handle @TheImprintNews, and you can visit us on the web at imprintnews.org. You can always reach us over email at tips@imprintnews.org. I'm John Kelly, and we will see you next week.